So picture this. You're just going through your life, right? Just like thinking about your video, trying to make it better, thinking about the things you can improve on, and then you start working on them. And then you look at the calendar and it's like, oh shit, suddenly it's May already. Yeah, so these videos are coming out way later than I wanted them to, again. But that's okay, I feel like I'm improving on a lot of aspects compared to last year's videos, and I'm sure that'll be the case going forward. Anyway, this is the third and final video going over my favorite things from anime from the year 2022. This time, of course, I'm going over my favorite anime, my favorite shows from 2022. Some quick rules, only shows that I watched the completion count, obviously, and I don't count incomplete seasons of shows. And what I mean by that is that if a show or a season of a show started airing like towards the end of the year, like fall, say, but continued running through the end of the year and didn't wrap up until next year, until 2023, then that show does not count for my list. Similarly, shows that started airing towards the end of 2021 but didn't wrap up until 2022 do count for this list. I hope that makes sense. And one more thing before we move on, I just want to say that the ranking in this video, and all of my videos for that matter, are not like permanent or set in stone. I'm sure that this ranking will change over time as I watch more shows that I haven't gotten around to watching yet, or as I rewatch the shows I already watched and appreciate them more or less. Anyway, I just want to get across the idea that the rankings you see in these videos are not permanent, they just how I feel at the moment. At the same time though, no matter how much this list changes, it's gonna remain looking something similar to what you see now. Anyway, without much further ado, this is the format for the text on the bottom of the screen. And before I get to the top 10, I'm just gonna run through some honorable mentions quickly, just say a couple things about them before we get into the top 10 proper. At number 15, we have the third season of Ascendance of a Bookworm. I just gotta say, it's been really pleasantly surprising seeing how the show has continued to engage me and just like surprise me with how decent it actually is throughout the years. Because at first glance, it's just another like disposable garbage, like seasonal isekai show, but I actually feel like it does a lot of really unique and interesting things pretty well. Of course, it has its strong suits and its weaknesses as well. It's a pretty cheap looking show, but overall, I think it's worth investing the time into. If you're down for some more low-key, slow-paced fantasy type shows. Also, the conclusion to the third season was actually pretty emotionally devastating. I was surprised at how hard it actually hit. At number 14, we got Spy X Family. Now, I will admit that I was kind of surprised to see this show not making my top 10 because I absolutely loved it, and it was one of the most hyped shows this year, to be honest. It had a lot of attention, a lot of eyes on it. But I guess that just goes to show how much I love the other shows I placed above it. Anyway, in short, on the surface this seems like a show about espionage and action. It takes place in like an analogous version of Germany in what is supposed to be like the Cold War period. But in reality, this is just like an absolutely adorable, delightful little slice of life comedy show about found family and the value of the relationships you have with other people. Just an absolute joy to watch. At number 13, we got Demon Slayer Entertainment District Arc. Now, this is the third season of the show. It's honestly a bit confusing because after the first season you have the Mugen Train movie, which followed the events of the manga. But then the Mugen Train movie got rebroadcast on TV as like 7 episodes of anime, so like, is that the second season or is this the second season? I don't know. It's confusing. It doesn't really matter in the end. Now, of course, Demon Slayer has taken the world by storm. It's just one of those absolutely explosive in popularity shonen. And me, myself being a shonen fan, I obviously also love it. It's an incredibly hyped show. Now, I do have my reservations about it, that's why it's not in the top 10 proper, but I can't help but love a well-executed shonen story. Besides, this particular season has some absolutely stunning action scenes. Like, I've seen people on Twitter make fun of other people for saying this, but this is genuinely some of the best looking action I've seen in a TV anime in a very long time. Now, whether that's the animation or the choreography or the compositing, whatever, it doesn't matter. The end result is that it still looks epic and hype as hell. Okay, at number 12 we have My Dress Up Darling. Now, this was a show that I was not expecting to be as good as it actually was. This was a blast to watch. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's got a very lovable cast of characters. I also feel like it manages to achieve this balance of being extremely wholesome and extremely horny at the same time. I don't know, it kind of made me realize that like, it's a pretty hard balance to achieve, that wholesome, horny balance. I feel like a lot of shows try to do it, but few do it as well as my Dress Up Darling. And at number 11 we have Call of the Night. Now, I'm actually kind of sad that this just barely missed the top 10 because I absolutely love this show. This was one of the biggest sleeper hits of the year for me. Now, this is a show whose strongest point is definitely its vibes. This is a vibe kind of show. That vibe is just this nocturnal urban vibe. It's all about just walking around the city at night, seeing what you find, the sorts of strange and bizarre characters that you run into. Of course, it also has like supernatural elements, like the fact that it's one of the main characters is a vampire, and it kind of goes into their little community and how they operate in the human world, which is all very interesting. But at the end of the day, this is a show that's all about appreciating the night. Number 10, we have Mob Psycho 103 from Studio Bones, the third and final season of the beloved series Mob Psycho 100. Now, the truth is that the second season of Mob Psycho was a very tough act to follow. Like, that season is just absolutely incredible. And I don't think that this third season is better than the second one, but I also think that it was a very satisfying and extremely well executed conclusion to the story. Now, I know that it may feel after the second season like this third season might not have been really necessary, but it does like sort of wrap up a lot of loose ends that were left behind from the previous season, and it also just completely finalizes and caps off Mob's character arc. Of course, it's still filled with some absolutely stellar, bombastic action scenes and animation in once very unique, recognizable derpy style, which is very easy to call ugly, but also works so well in animation, and Bones make it look so good. There were definitely some pretty bizarre moments and episodes in this show which completely came out of nowhere. I'm talking about the episode where they meet literal aliens. Also the whole arc with the giant broccoli, or the whole last couple of episodes with just Mob going on a rampage. I don't want to spoil too much, but what I'm trying to say is that this show, and tying up all the loose ends, also made a lot of like really interesting and bizarre choices, which I appreciate. All in all, while second season of Mob is definitely the peak of the series, the third season is an incredible send-off and finale to a series that, now that it's over, I can confidently say is definitely one of the best anime that came out of the previous decade. And, you know, maybe of all time, only time will tell, but I think it could get up there. At this point in time, I definitely feel more positively about Mob Psycho than about one's other more popular work, One Punch Man. But at the same time, that's also based on only watching the anime. Anyway, if you like One Punch Man, if you like Mob Psycho but haven't watched this third season because you're not convinced, watch it. It's definitely worth it. At number 9, we have Bleach, The 1,000-Year Blood War by Studio Pierrot. Bleach is back, baby! 2022 was the year that I was fully back on board the Bleach hype train. Now, it was one of the very first anime I watched, and one of my favorites growing up, actually. But there was definitely a dark period in which I wasn't on the hype as much, because there wasn't really much to be hyped about. Like the anime had wrapped up, the manga had wrapped up, and Bleach's reputation during this time definitely decreased a lot online. But I'm glad to see that with this new show, everybody just is back on board the hype train, realizing how good the show actually is. I actually binged the old anime. I rewatched the whole thing with my roommate to get him up to speed to watch this new season. And yeah, the anime as an adaptation is not great, but the story itself holds up. It's still a great fucking show. And this new season, oh my god, this is what I wish the Bleach anime always had been. Just absolutely stellar, gorgeous looking animation, no alterations to the story, everything shines, every character shines. Watching this show week to week felt like such a cathartic moment as someone who's been a fan of Bleach for so long, and as someone who's seen people talk trash about it for so long. The only sad part though is realizing that the original Bleach anime was not as good as this new one, but it's okay. This had some truly tense, dark moments, some of the most hype moments, some of the most hyped fight scenes of the year by far. I don't know, I'm just fully back in Bleach fanboy mode at this point. Now, I gotta say that I think part of why I love this so much is also because this is one of the better parts of the final arc, because the final arc, while it has a lot of really good parts, but it also has a lot of problems. But I'm also very interested to see how they handle those problems going forward with the next parts of the next seasons of 1000 Year Blood War. I know Kubo himself has stated that there will be changes made to the source material to stick more closely to his original vision of the arc, and I can't wait to see what it is. Everybody behold, The Rock! At number 8, we have Bocchi the Rock by Cloverworks. Now this was another huge sleeper hit, maybe the biggest sleeper hit of the year, according to me at least. This is another show that kind of came out of nowhere, didn't have a lot of hype, and just absolutely blew up. Everybody loved it, myself included. And this is just a show about a very anxiety-ridden girl called Bocchi, who's also an incredibly good guitarist, and all she's ever wanted was to be in a band, to write music, and her dream finally comes true. But she still has to struggle with her anxiety, coming out of her shell, making friends. In short, it's just like a cute girls in a band show. Now, to be honest, I was originally planning on checking it out purely based on that premise alone. I do enjoy my cute girls doing cute things, moi blob type shows from time to time, and this is about a subject that I'm very passionate about, music. And I was just absolutely stunned, just absolutely taken by surprise by how good the show actually is. It's like every single element in this show just works in perfect synergy to create this amazing package. The animation is amazing, looks gorgeous, it's really funny, the comedy is on point, the characters are super lovable, all of them. The music in the show is actually so good, it's so fucking good. Honestly, one of the biggest things about like music-based anime that holds them back, in my opinion, is that a lot of the times the music is not that good. I mean, maybe it's the fact that I just don't personally like it, but you know, I just think it holds it back for me personally a lot of the time. This is one of the few exceptions where they actually pulled everything off, and it's so good for it. And it's also not just that the animation is good, but just the amount of creativity and experimentation that goes into it as well. It's like every single episode they tried something new, some new sort of visual thing, some new animation. I could keep gushing about this show, but the point is that it rocks. Everything about it is great. Now, I know that a lot of people are really turned off by like cute girls, moe type shows, and that's fair. I understand that, but at the same time, this is the absolute cream of the crop of the genre. This is some of the best out of that genre, so I would still urge pretty much everyone to check it out.
わざわざ会長がそんなことしなくて大丈夫ですよ。
そうだな。
そうですよ。会長は本当に心配。あれ？もしかして今、私デートに誘われた？
At number 7, we have Kaguya-sama, Love is War, Ultra Romantic by A1 Pictures. The third and apparently final season of Kaguya-sama, Love is War. Now, Kaguya-sama has become an extremely beloved romantic comedy show, and in my opinion, the hype is absolutely deserved. This show is absolutely lovely. Now, I have to admit that it took me a while to get into the show. Like, the first couple of times that I tried it, I didn't really like it that much. I thought it was kind of cringe and annoying, to be honest. But as I actually got into the rest of the show and watched all of it, I realized how great it actually is. The characters are just absolutely lovable. They're always fun and hilarious when they're on screen. The comedy is great. The show looks gorgeous. Everything about it just works so well. I feel like each season has been outdoing the previous one, doing better than the last one, and that's no exception with this one. Season 3 absolutely knocked it out of the park. The way it just continued to develop and wrap up every character's sort of character arcs and story arcs. I also appreciate how, as time passes, a lot of the like more minor side characters also get pretty decent amount of screen time and characterization, fully fleshing out the cast of characters and making them even more likable and fun to watch. And of course, I cannot forget about how incredible that finale was, the final episode. If you haven't watched it, I'm not gonna spoil what happens, but it's such a huge payoff to everything that's been happening in the show previously. This third season did get followed up with a movie, The First Kiss That Never Ends, and it seems like that is apparently the finale for the anime. Although there's still more material in the manga that could be adapted, it seems like this might be where they ended off, but honestly I think that's fine. I think between this final season and the movie, we had a pretty satisfying finale. Kaguya-sama Love is War will probably go down in time as one of the most beloved anime rom-coms of all time. At At number 6, we have Chainsaw Man from MAPPA. Now, Chainsaw Man might have been the most hyped up show that came out last year. The manga already had a lot of hype behind it online. A lot of people were already very into it before this anime came out. So going into it, just the amount of hype and expectation for this show was completely insane. And now, did it live up to that hype? I would mostly say no, but that's only because the expectations were so incredibly high. At the end of the day, Chainsaw Man is still an incredible show, even if it didn't meet those ridiculous expectations. It's an absolute breath of fresh air in the landscape of shonen anime. Absolutely grimy, gritty, bloodbath, dark story following the life of Denji, who's a guy who just wants to live a normal life but is pretty much cursed with having to lead the life that he actually does and having to fight his way through it. It feels like everything that Chainsaw Man does, every decision that it takes, it's just sort of a different take, a breath of fresh air on something that a regular shonen manga or anime would do. And the way it manages to weave in influences outside of manga and anime, pulling from mostly Western movies, which I know Fujimoto, the author, is a great fan of. It also brings me to the adaptation, because I know that a lot of people complain about the adaptation, how it looks too clean, but I honestly really kind of like the direction. As someone who's watched this season and read pretty much the counterpart of it in the manga, a lot of people complain that the style in the anime doesn't have the same grit or dirtiness that the art style in the manga does, and I definitely can appreciate that sentiment, but I also feel like this approach of making it feel more like a movie, it is also very valid and I appreciate it a lot. And at the end of the day, there's so many things that can be said about Chainsaw Man, about how dark and violent the action is, which just makes it stand out, about how Denji is an absolute breath of fresh air when it comes to shonen protagonists. But even with all that, even if it didn't live up to the expectations, if you go in just forgetting all that, this is an incredible show. The story is gripping, the characters are interesting and extremely well realized. They feel extremely realistic considering the setting and considering the fact that they're still anime characters. I don't know, there's almost like something that can be put into words about the approach that Fujimoto has taken to this story and about how much it makes it stand out from the rest. Now I do have to say it's not higher on this list because with this first season, you definitely get the feeling that we barely scratched the surface of this story and there's still so much more that we haven't seen. I'm very excited to see what we get from a second season and I hope it gets announced soon, but even if it doesn't, this first season is a great start.
私はこの石の海から自由になる。聞こえた？ストーンフリーよ。これが名前。
At number 5, we have JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stone Ocean, the 6th part of JoJo by David Production. Now technically this entry only counts for the 2nd and 3rd parts, which are the ones that came out during 2022. But in reality, I'm going to be talking about the whole show in general. Now, this was a part that actually took me a little while to get into. Like, when the first part came out, I liked it, but I wasn't fully invested in it until the later parts. The truth is that, going by my own rules, part 1 could have made my list for 2021, but it didn't because, like I said, I just wasn't super into it yet. Well, but now that the show's wrapped up and I watched everything, I can say for sure this part was absolutely incredible. Like I said, it starts slow, but there's always something that's gonna keep you going. For one, I think Jolene has become one of my favorite JoJo protagonists so far. She's just so charismatic, she's a joy to watch, she's so fucking cool and badass at all moments. I think Araki did a great job with her. And it's not just her, of course, the extended cast of characters as always is bizarre, goofy, fun to watch, but can also feel really threatening and menacing. I also think that Stone Ocean had an exceptional villain as well in Riko. When he was introduced, he was already like a pretty charismatic character that was fun to see on the screen, but the more we saw of him and the more we got into his backstory growing up and how he met Dio, I just felt this great appreciation for him as a villain and as a character. Of course, the interactions, the fights, the confrontations with other stand users are always bizarre as hell and an absolute joy to watch, completely unexpected. It's always fun to see how Araki resolves that seemingly unresolvable situation. Of course, sometimes it comes across kinda like as bullshit, but hey, you roll with the punches. That's kind of part of the JoJo experience. Not all of the stands in this part were equally good. There were some that I thought were pretty dumb, but most of them were pretty cool. And of course, I can't forget about the final confrontation in the finale, the final part with the whole cast facing off against Pucci. God damn, what a rush that was. That was one of the most tense, one of the most intense fight scenes I've seen out of JoJo in a really long time. And just the way the story ends in this really bittersweet, this is really melancholy, pretty sad note actually, even though the heroes do win in the end. I just thought the way Araki handled it was masterful, if I'm being honest. Now, I'm not gonna spoil exactly what happens because I really think this is something you should experience for yourself. But trust me, if you like JoJo at all, if you've watched any JoJo but haven't gone this far yet, trust me, this part is truly great, and I think it has become one of my favorites. At number 4, we have Cyberpunk Edge Runners from Trigger. Now, following the massive letdown that was the Cyberpunk 2077 video game, I'm sure a lot of people had very mixed feelings, mixed expectations for this show. All that got blown out the window as soon as this show came out. This show is incredible. A very brief, very tightly packed story about a sci-fi dystopia where corporations run the world, and if you're against them, it's pretty much over for you, but there's still people who resist. This was easily one of the best sci-fi anime I've seen in years, and it's also so good to see Trigger back in full form. This feels like the best show that Trigger has made in a really long time. It's got their classic trademark chaotic style, very punk characters, just sort of like this overall like very anarchic energy and philosophy when it comes to their animation, which imbue their shows with so much energy. But at the same time, there's a real soul, a real heart to this story and the message it's trying to tell. Although some of them we don't see on screen that much, all the characters are pretty compelling, are pretty interesting and fun to watch. The tech in the show itself, the sci-fi stuff, is really cool and interesting as well. There's a lot of really good and interesting world building that happens in this show that's pretty short. It's only 10 episodes and it completely wraps its story. Doesn't feel like a show that wasn't intended to have more seasons. It's also good to get shows like that from time to time because a lot of anime, based on the fact that they're based on ongoing source material, can feel quite incomplete. The show overall is this harsh critique of capitalism and how it will push people at the fringes even further in what they will do to their bodies and minds. And while the conclusion of the show it's pretty dark, at the same time there's always this sort of hope, this sort of heart just beating throughout the whole show. I don't know what else I can say. It was just an absolute thrill ride, an absolute joy to watch, and definitely one of the must-watch anime from last year. If you take anything from this video, definitely watch this one. At number 3, we have Ranking of Kings by Wit Studio. Now this was another show that kind of came out of nowhere a little bit, that nobody was really paying attention to until it started airing. And this one I feel is a very special show because nothing about it feels like from a template or like generic. Everything about it, from the character designs, the world design, to the story itself, feels so refreshing and new. It's basically a fantasy story about this prince called Boji, who's never been thought of as much because he's deaf. This is just basically his journey to sort of proving themselves and proving how he can step up to the plate and be the person that he needs to be, but also be appreciated for who he truly is. Obviously, one of this show's strongest points is character writing, but there's so many other things that it does as well. I personally love the character designs because they don't look like generic anime designs at all. They look more like something out of like a Western cartoon for kids, but soon you'll realize that this show is not for kids. It takes some pretty dark turns, and that's part of what kept me going back to it, the sort of contrast between how the show looks and the sort of overall message it's trying to portray and how like dark and violent it can actually get. I think that contrast makes it super compelling. And it can also get really weird. The fantasy elements in this show feel really unique in how they're implemented and how they're represented visually. It feels like every element about this show came from the minds of somebody who wants to take the fantasy genre and just put an absolutely unique personal spin on it. And I think that's one of the biggest draws of Ranking of Kings as a series, as a story. I also have to mention just the absolutely stellar job that Wit Studio did with the animation. Like I mentioned before, the character designs themselves I think are really appealing, partly because of how unique and not anime they look, but Wit Studio themselves did some amazing things with the action scenes, with the backgrounds, the environments, just everything in general just works together so well. At the end of the day, despite how dark and grim this show can get at times, it's still a show that has a pretty lighthearted message at its core about how kindness can change people, and about sort of accepting yourself for who you are and using your own strengths in your own way. Hey guys, so before we get into the top 2 picks, I just wanted to make a quick announcement, a quick disclaimer, if you will. So I have decided to make a very last minute decision for the top 2 picks of my video. So my top 2 picks that you're gonna see in this video, the order for them originally during the conception and planning and filming and editing and everything of this video was originally intended to be flipped. But after a lot of thought, after a lot of deliberation, I have decided that the show, which was originally going to be my number 2, is actually, after a lot of thinking, my favorite show of this year. And the show, which is not going to be my number 2, is the one that was originally going to be my number 1. I just wanted to point this out because this is, again, like I said, a very last minute decision. I'm working on editing right now, and decided to do this because it's just more true to how I feel about these series. If it sounds a little confusing, or like if I'm being a little vague about it, it's just because I don't want to like actually spoil what these 2 shows are before you actually like see me talk about them. But just bear in mind that the order that you see in this video was originally flipped, and I last minute decided to change it again. So if you see any parts of the video that seem kind of off, or like I'm referring to the number 1 show, it's like the number 2 or whatever, bear in mind that when I was filming this video, this was just not how it was planned to be, and I just changed it last minute just because I felt like it'd be more true. Anyway, please enjoy the rest of the video. And at number 1 is Attack on Titan Final Season Part 2 by MAPPA. In last year's video, I talked about the great job it did in bringing back the Heidi interest, in just how it completely reversed, just how it completely recontextualized everything about the previous seasons. And the second part just continued to do that, and just to like raise the standard for the story. While it feels like part 1 was mostly set up, and I appreciate it for how its world building and its characters just completely flipped the story on its head, this series is all payoff. It's all just edge of your seat, nail-biting action. Just the tension is so high just running through this entire season. These characters that we have known for so long, as well as the characters that we have met recently but have also come to love, just the way they just face each other, the way they get pushed, the way this conflict in the series has pushed these characters to their brink. Everything about the show and watching it week to week just left me in complete awe at just what I was watching. And just, of course, I have to talk about how the show provided one of the greatest plot twists of all time in anime. If you haven't seen it, I'm not gonna spoil what it is, but trust me when I say that, it's good. It's really good. Like I said, everything about part 1 was just stepped up to such an incredible degree in part 2, to the point where I feel like part 2 of the final season was probably the peak of the series for me, if I'm being completely honest. Like, this is probably the singular season of Attack on Titan that I've enjoyed the most, and it's made everything before it just absolutely worth it. I do truly love how this particular season came out, and how much this made me appreciate Attack on Titan as a whole. Now, with this second part, unfortunately it didn't wrap up the story. We still have some more to go. Now, there is a lot that can be said about how MAPPA is just completely stretching out and just completely squeezing as much as they can out of Attack on Titan now that it's almost over. But it's almost over. We only have the Attack on Titan final season, the final chapters left, and we only have 1 episode of those before series is truly over. But I gotta say that I've really appreciated just the place where it's come, and just how absolutely harrowing and dark it's been, and just how the person who was previously our protagonist is basically just has become the main antagonist of the series. I'm not sure if I will talk about it again in next year's video, because like I said, the finale of the show is just like a 2 episode special, but I think that I might definitely make a video on my final thoughts on it as it wraps up. Whatever might happen with the finale, just let it be known that this final season was just an absolutely wild ride that just made me completely fall in love with the series again.
私たちはとうとうたどり着き、そして二度とそこから戻れなかった。
At number 2, in second place, we have Made in Abyss, the Golden City of the Scorching Sun by Kinema Citrus. This is the second season of the very beloved fantasy series Made in Abyss. Now, Made in Abyss was already a show that kind of took the world by storm when it came out back in 2017. And I would say that it continues to be my favorite show that came out that year. But for the second season, I felt like just it stepped everything up to such an incredible degree of quality. Like, I don't know, every episode watching the show was just amazed at everything that I was seeing. There's just so much about the second season that made it so good that it's kind of overwhelming, to be completely honest. You have the way that Made in Abyss continues to take its protagonists and put them into just these ridiculously harsh, grim situations without hesitation, kind of. But it's more than just it being really dark, although it is. With this second season in particular, with this particular arc, I feel like there's just so much that went into this story, and there's so much to be read from. There's all the messages it's trying to convey about value and about what makes things valuable to us as people. There's so much that you can say about like the vision of the human race and how that can ultimately curse people. There's even messages that you can read into it about how like a place affects us as people, and there's more that can go into it. It's truly insane to think about just how much is in this story, just how much you can read into it. Honestly, I'm not someone who likes to throw around the term deep. I don't like to call something deep because I kind of feel like it doesn't really mean anything. But I feel like for Made in Abyss, especially the second season, that term really applies. This is a show that will have you on the edge of your seat with a story, that will have you just grimacing at how truly dark it can be in so many ways, but will also have you crying at like the pure heart, the pure soul at the bottom of it, at the bottom of its characters, of its message. And this is a show that brought me to tears several times throughout this season. Please know that this show comes with the highest recommendation for me personally. With this, I think Made in Abyss has definitely become one of my favorite anime of all time. I've thought before about dedicating a video just to Made in Abyss just because I feel like there's so much I could say about it. But for now, just know that it's really, really freaking good. And that's it. With that, I've wrapped up my videos talking about my favorite things from anime from 2022. What did you think? Did you agree? Did you disagree? What was your favorite show of 2022? Honestly, although I think there's a lot of things that I've managed to improve on compared to last year's videos, there's still a lot to be improved, especially the timeliness. Next year, I would like to have these videos out sooner, because at the time of the recording of this video, it's May 2nd, which means that the videos won't come out till later in May, which is still a bit later than I would like for these videos going over stuff that happened last year. But anyway, there's always room for improvement, and I hope that next year's videos will be better. And hopefully I'll also be putting out some more videos other than this in the future, so please look forward to that. But for now, if you like, please share it, like it, leave a comment, subscribe, you know, all that stuff. Anyway, that's it for this video. See you next time.